Pompa here. Oh my gosh, where's Meredith? And what guests do I actually have on? Because I have two amazing guests that I'm going to introduce you to today. I think most of you actually know one, and that's my wife, Marilee. But, you know, she actually loved this topic so much that she decided, well, she just made a choice. I'm going to be on the show, and I'm going to be part of this interview. And so there she is today. So, Marilee, welcome to Cell TV. You have never been on the show before.
Hi, looking forward to this. Right. I'm super excited. This is totally up my alley.
Well, listen, I'm going to let you introduce our official guest, actually, and read his bio, because both of us actually, we actually spent the weekend. We read his book, and we've been listening to his music. That is very, very special music that you're going to find out on this show. And listen, this is going to be one of those shows you're going to want to share with many people, because I really do believe in my heart, this is a game changer. This will change not just your life, but I believe it was given to this man, you know, to change the planet. And that's my belief. And I think Marilee's as well. So Marilee, go ahead. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everybody. Okay, well, let me tell you about Michael Tyrrell. Just here's his bio. He is the founder and president of Wholetones, Inc., a healing frequency music project that helps aid health, creativity, productivity, and well-being. After recording 7 songs at different frequency levels, Michael has been studying for over 20 years. He released his album Wholetones, the healing frequency music project, accompanied by his book entitled Wholetones, which we read yesterday. It was fascinating. The Sound of Healing in 2014. Passion musical healing, Michael travels nationally and internationally as a keynote and motivational speaker on the power of therapeutic music. Since the release of the original Wholetones collection, Michael has released Wholetones, Life, Love, and Lullabies, as well as Wholetones, Calming Music for Dogs. All of Michael's Wholetones recordings have reached the top 10 on the Billboard music charts. Always connected to music, Michael bought his first guitar at the age of 10, which later led him to study classical guitar with Joseph Lazaro, a protege of the grandfather of classical guitar, Andre Segovia. In recent years, Michael has traveled and ministered with Christian singer-songwriter Jason Upton and toured and recorded with Rick Pino and Fire Rain Ministries. In 1987, Michael worked with Gospel Hall of Famer Mylon Lefevre and his band, Mylon and the Broken Heart, earning him a GMA Dove Award as well as a Grammy. Michael has been in full-time ministry for the last 26 years and has toured and played with many well-known Christian and secular bands. His experience as a youth pastor, worship leader, accomplished musician, producer, and itinerant speaker has allowed his personal music frequency project to transcend international borders. Michael currently resides with his wife Lillian in Palm Beach County, Florida.
Well, Michael, you know, it's an impressive resume. Yeah, you know, but
when God is, I was going to say, when God's leading you, it's amazing. I'm fascinated. I can't wait to hear.
Wonderful. You know, it is. Yeah, it's an impressive resume, but people will be like, okay, we want to know, because my viewers, watchers, listeners are, you know, they're about their health, right? And, you know, I really want to start with your story. You know, I did episode 195, and I believe you actually saw the episode, and it may be how you actually got in contact with me. But this one excites me to the core, you know, because there's a story here, you know, and as a Christian believer myself, you know, when I heard the story, man, it just made all the sense to me. And it, you know, it excited my wife and I so much that, like I said, we really did spend the weekend. We read the book, and we've been listening to these tones of music since then. So with that said, you know, jump into the story, because there is a really special story, you know, how I believe you believe that God brought this to you.
Absolutely. A lot of great discoveries start with a question. And the better the question, the better the discovery. And I found that when I asked a simple question was, in a musical sense, why do tuners calibrate to A, the note A, on a musical instrument equaling 440 hertz? I could never get an answer to my question. And as I kept asking that question, I realized that there was a whole lot more to this story. At the same time, Dr. Pompa, I was asked to go to Israel with Don Finto, who was my pastor at that time when I worked at Belmont Church in Nashville. We went to Israel. I could tell you stories about that trip that would blow your mind just from going through security at El Al. And literally the people that were involved in security there, at one point, we thought we were going to get, sent back home. And instead, the people that were checking us at security bent down and put their hands on our feet and prayed that we would bring Jesus to their nation. And these were Jewish people at LaGuardia Airport. So it started out awesome. So, but here's the easiest way to get into the story. We went there without a GPS. We went there with only the Holy Spirit and discernment as our directive. And my pastor, Don Findo, looked at me. I said, what are we going to do here? And he goes, oh, heavens, I don't know. And so, which I loved. And he said, we're just going to ask the Holy Spirit to direct us, and we'll stay as long as he wants us to stay. And he said, but I am getting a feeling that we're supposed to go to Ben Yehuda Street in Jerusalem. And there's a particular coffee house there. And a friend of mine that has no idea where in the country is going to meet us there. And I'm just going, this is Huck Finn. I love this whole thing. So we did just that. And I was driving, which once you get to know me, you'll find out that there's probably Amber Alerts with my face on them because I have no sense of direction. But I'm driving in a country I've never driven in before. But we get to Jerusalem, thank the Lord, and got to Ben Yehuda Street, got to this coffee house. So when we walked in, there was a guy playing piano. And it was funny. I sat down, and as soon as I looked at the stage, he started staring at me and smiling. And it was awkward because he just kept smiling at me while he was playing. And I didn't want to be the first guy to look away. But eventually I just thought, what in the world? And then it came. It's like, this guy is playing instrumental versions of worship songs that we worship to in the United States in a Hasidic coffee house. And he's getting away with murder because they have no idea what he's doing because there's no lyrics. And then I know why he's laughing at me, because he's picking up on the fact that me and Don Finto, my pastor, are believers. He must have seen something in our eyes. But long story short, he came up after the break and said, you guys are believers for sure, aren't you? And I said, yes. And he said, well, when I woke up this morning, Yeshua told me to put my life's work into a bag and I was supposed to give it to someone today. And he said, it's you. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it was smash mouth. I had nothing to say. And I just looked, I said, what's your name? And he said, David. And I said, oh, that's perfect. So what his life's work was at that point was basically unraveling the Psalms of David, finding out content from a prose standpoint, what the words were, melodic content. And he gave me all of his work after a break there. I had a bag full of 2 different types of notation, which would be typical, what we would call tablature form, and then more of an integrative type of music that didn't have any key signatures or notation. So I didn't know what to do. And while I'm sitting there trying to figure all this, somebody just handed me something very important. This guy that my friend Don was talking about walks into the door from Tel Aviv, like 2 hours away. And they just hug each other like they really set up an appointment, but they didn't. And it was so funny because he said, the Lord woke me up. His friend said, the Lord woke me up this morning and told me to get to this coffee house in Jerusalem. So that meeting place was the center point of our entire trip over there, but much more came out of it, obviously. But what was so amazing was going to another country and listening for the voice of the Spirit and literally letting him be our GPS, our God positioning satellite, to get us from Ben Gurion Airport to a place where a young man gave me his life work, which is what has turned into Wholetones.
Yeah. So what did you do with it? Okay. So, did you like right away know what it was? Did you just throw it in the corner? What happened?
Absolutely not, Dr. Pompa. I had little understanding of what it was at all. And I didn't have an instrument on the trip, so I couldn't play the music. So I was knee deep in proofreading Don's new book, Anywhere Your People Should Be My People. So I just put it in my bag, brought it back to the United States, took it out of my office, looked at it, played the tablature version, didn't do anything for me. And then the other one, which I didn't understand it. It was like avant-garde notation. It didn't make any sense to me. So I did what anybody would do. I filed it away in get back to that one day in my office. And I didn't look at it again for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
So then you want to know what happened after 2 years, don't you?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay. So one day I went up to my office, and in the morning, the first thing I do is I ask myself a question. Michael, why do you do what you do? And who are you doing it for? And if the answer isn't Jesus, I have to sit there until my mind gets back to the directive of why I'm doing what I'm doing. I don't leave the house. I don't do anything. So in the morning is my time where I get centered with him. And I'm sitting in my office, and all of a sudden I have this inclination that, I should take my thin line Bible and turn to page 222. And in my mind, I'm thinking, while I'm doing this, if there's anything about David on that page, I'm going to come out of my skin. And it ended up being the chronology. And at the end, it says, then David, the son of Jacob. And I lost it. And I was like, and then the whole it was like a Rubik's Cube. Like you're playing with it and you're not getting anywhere. Then you do one thing and all the colors come up. And it was like, I just had this aha. And I went, no, it can't be this easy. And the Lord said, double it. I went, 444? He said, 444, the key of David. And I was like, the key of David, the key of David. Okay, the key of David in Isaiah 22:22 meant, very simply, there was a man named Shebna who was given the physical key to David's front palace door, and he alone had the ability to open that door or lock that door. So there was a physical key of David, okay? That key was later given to another man because Shebna was found to be basically a crook. And so I thought, okay, so I understand that part. And then I found a key of David reference in the book of Revelation, and that was the game changer for me because I realized, like most prophetic words, there's always a physical and then there's a prophetic. And the prophetic understanding of the key of David was simple, is that it's also a spirit, there's a spiritual key, and that key opens doors that no man can open, and that shuts doors that no man can close. But that wasn't a physical key like we know it. It was a key, a musical key. In other words, what key is that? The key of David is 444 hertz. So when I got that far, the next part of it was deciphering this avant-garde notation. And it was amazing. Once I had, it's just like anything else. Once you have the code, then the rest of it is just rote. You just start working. Once I knew that the A that I was looking for was not 440 hertz, but 444 hertz, that was my A as the tuning center, then all roads led back to David's 10-string Kinnor, it being tuned to a certain frequency. And why did David, in the midst of all these other great musicians, why did he have this innate power to walk in to a courtroom or a palace with the same type instrument, yet when he played, the demons that provoked and terrorized Saul were instantly quelled, and there was nothing but God's presence? What could change something so much that the environment would instantly change? And suddenly I realized that this whole domain of frequency is far more specific and far more sensitive than I had ever imagined, that a simple 4 cents difference between 440 and 444 could be the difference from the top of your head to the soles of your feet.
And I have to say, this is interesting note, because there's many of these frequencies. These frequencies, at least 4 or 6 of the frequencies that in your 7, they're on the internet, right? I mean, people talk about these frequencies. One of the things you found is David played, in a completely, his instruments were tuned completely different. So there lies some of the difference of the music that we listen to from you versus what you would get on the internet. Talk a little bit about that, because
absolutely
people watching this don't understand.
Well, all of us are in the same plus minus age, group. And so I don't know if you remember, but when I was little, the TV used to go off around 1 o'clock and you'd hear a test tone. There'd be this ugly black and white screen, and then and I'm like, you couldn't get to the switch quick enough to shut it off. Because
the millennials out there have no clue what we're talking about. Yeah. I mean,
well, they can YouTube it. Just go to www.oldfolks.com. No, but no, seriously though, it did happen. It was called a test tone pattern, and it was tuned to the emergency broadcasting system in case while we were sleeping, we were nuked by one of our enemies. So long story short, I was looking online just like you, Dr. Pompa, and I realized that these people were using a test tone generator, which is a simple device that just recreates electronically these particular frequencies we speak of in a digital sense. And I was looking, and people were just recording that, and then you'd look and you'd see in the corner 1 hour and 6 seconds, and I'd turn it on. I lasted about 6 seconds. It's like, there's no way in the world I could listen to this, even if it was helping me. So it's so cool you asked this question. So I thought the first thing was, okay, not only have I had to find the tuning center, not only do I have to basically unlearn everything I've known about composition, music, writing, pretty much everything, sidestep myself and let God take over. But I also got to figure out how I'm going to create an underlayment of frequency that would be almost like something the body craves instead of rejects and wants to shut off. So I don't know if I've told anybody this live before, but I'll tell you what I did. It should be proprietary, but I don't mind sharing if more people do this, praise the Lord. But my point is, I had to find an organic way to create that frequency underlayment, okay? And that's exactly what I did. I won't tell you exactly how I did, but I used water and crystal for part of it, and I used an orchestra with real wood strings for the other part of it. But I recreated all those frequencies with naturally occurring things in nature that would resonate with people. So what I found was when we were playing the frequency underlayments, the people in the studio that were visiting said, I could listen to that for the rest of my life. And that's when I knew, if I can get some guys together that can flow in the spirit without needing music, and they can run with me where I'm going, and I can put this frequencies as an underlayment under this, it could change the whole world. Because it's like, you're going to want to listen to it until it's done, and then you're going to want to push repeat, because part of it's working on a cellular level, and the other part is audio enticement. The other part, like the frequency is the medicine, and the music around it is like the spoonful of sugar that helps the medicine go down.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I know that when, David actually, I mean, it was cedar wood, I believe, right? You said your book. Yeah. He made the instruments out of, which Saul, recreated it out of another type of wood. But the cedar wood was really key to even hitting the energy needed for these certain pitches or frequencies.
And there was other things about it too. First of all, the type of cedar had a higher tensile strength. So as you can realize from physics, that if you're raising a pitch to a higher pitch than all the other pickers are picking in Israel, then you need a more resilient wood that is stronger to be able to. It's negligible, Dr. Pompa, but there is more string tension, obviously, if you go up 4 cents. The secondary part that made this amazing, that he may or may not have known, is that cedar is impervious to insects. Yeah. And thus these instruments can last a lifetime.
Right. I think we have to step back. I know Marilee has a lot of questions, but which are probably better than mine, more interesting anyway. But I have to get through the science a little bit here, Sure. And I think we have some people watching this that maybe like, what are they talking about? Meaning that, I've done other shows on, frequency and this is cellular healing. What does the frequency have to do with the cell? How can it benefit us? Why would certain frequencies benefit us? And I would argue, and you make an argument in your book, that other frequencies like 440, that's the classic, actually can be very disruptive to the cell. Explain some of the science there.
Absolutely. Well, even with the science, and hopefully through this whole thing, we're having this beautiful mingling of both science and spirituality, but when we hear one thing from the Bible, it is the power of life and death is in the tongue. We realize that within that power, there's a power to what? Create or destroy. Right. Frequency and words, thoughts, all of that is the same type of energy, how it's released and what it does. And so with that being said, there are both positive frequencies that work with the body, and there are negative frequencies that push against how we are genetically wired and how we are organically and in the genius of God created. So with that being said, I myself have already come up with I'll be still releasing frequencies until I'm fertilizer. I have thousands and thousands of positive frequencies. How that really works and why people will hopefully begin to understand this quickly, I try to demystify all of it and do a novel job in the book. The most important takeaway is that frequency, first of all, is nothing new, and it's elemental. We have to understand it because it's everything, every thought, every word, our ability to concentrate, the bandwidth that we're using on our Wi-Fi and our devices to connect with your listeners right now. All of that is frequency. So how does it affect the human body? It's real simple. We are an energy field by God's design. We work off, X amount of Gauss of electricity, and we're electrically charged for one very good reason. If God hadn't have created us that way, we would have taken off into the ionosphere because we have gravity. So in other words, to defeat gravity or to at least have homeostasis with gravity, we have to be electrically charged so we stay on the earth. Yeah. With that being said, frequencies affect, real simple. When was the last time any of your listeners got pulled over by a policeman for speeding? The moment that happens, right, there's things that autonomically happen in your body. First of all, there's certain endorphins and certain adrenaline that pumps into your system instantly, that goes to your stomach and makes you nauseated, right? But your thoughts are frequencies, and you've already created a mental picture that I'm going to get a ticket. It's going to be at least $200. What is my husband going to say? You know what I'm saying? So frequency is a mystery to people, but it's actually like air that we breathe. We don't think about the fact that we're breathing air. We breathe it. Let
me interrupt you right now. I'm doing some research for my next seminar. Bruce Lipton, it's the biology of belief. In this, I mean, the brilliant stem cell biologist, he said our thoughts are frequency.
Yes.
Our thoughts communicate with the receptors, the same receptors that hormones communicate. Tells those receptors on the cell membrane what DNA to make.
That is correct.
Communicate with RNA. Those make certain proteins that turns into you, your biology, ultimately your destiny. So fact is your biology is your beliefs and your thoughts, which is basically energy communicated from thoughts to cell. It is biology and it is science.
And the best part is that, yes, as a man thinketh, so he is. No question about that. But this gets even bigger in a fun kind of way, because we can't truncate frequency to be only audio. We have to also realize it's light. We have to also, right? So the sun affects us in ways that we don't understand unless we understand frequency. We also have to understand one thing about frequency very quickly, that is in our human ability to be able to hear. We have a very small bandwidth as opposed to other animals, other creatures in the world. And then on the low end of that, even subatomic particles, quarks. Isn't it interesting that the word says that everything that is visible was created from that which is invisible? Isn't that amazing? Yeah. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Isn't that interesting? It's unbelievable. So my point is, on the human level, on a cellular level, the good news is, and I'll be able to furnish you with it eventually, is right now I'm having to study a holographic blood study of before and after while people are listening to Wholetones, how it's affecting their blood in real time. In 3D, HD. So what's awesome is, it's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to see it. But with what you just mentioned, was it Dr. Lipton, did you say?
Yeah, Bruce Lipton, yeah.
Perfect. So one of the things that your readers can look up right now, some of this is squelched for reasons, and some of this is available to check on Google. But one is 528. Physicists and chemists, scientists, now doctors are using 528 in a myriad of different ways, but one of the most I think is fantastic is that they found out that it has a direct connection to the human DNA chain. And they're even doing research now because they believe that 528 could extend telomere length, which is like...
I read that in your book, and of course that was a fascination for me. Man. 528, that's like, I mean, I'm going to be playing that one.
Well, let me just to add one thing, since your wife's on it, because my wife loves talking about this one because it was such a hoot. You have to understand that it doesn't matter who it is or who's considered. The people call me the expert of frequency. I don't know if I'm an expert of anything, but when you have that thing, if we're honest, we realize that we're all students of life and we're all always learning. And so some of my learning comes from subtraction, and some of it comes from our 100,000 plus testimonials now. But what was funny was when I released 528, you get people and everything is, peace, relaxation, sleep, then the frequency 417. Oh my gosh, I'm doing more creatives. Our whole office switched over. No one's getting the 4 o'clock, need a cup of coffee, all that good stuff. But I started getting a bunch of women in the 38 to 48, 50-year range that were saying that 528 was driving them nuts. And I thought, that's not good, because that's a big part of my demographic, and I want them to be happy people and peaceful people. So after like 50 or 60 of these emails saying, this irritates the snot out of me, I can't stand this frequency, why? I love them all, but this one, why? Well, one thing and you guys know better than anybody, is that when you're dealing with non-allopathic modalities of healing, there's always the chance of a Herxheimer response or a healing crisis. This is no different than that. What you need, if I start doing a master cleanse and there's beets and some other stuff in there, you know what? I'm going to feel crummy the next day probably. But within 3 days, I'm going to feel awesome. Well, if you hit a frequency you really need, you might get irritated, you might feel lightheaded, you might have flu-like symptoms. People forget this isn't just music, this is therapy. So with that being said, I'm sitting here in my office going, okay, God, what do I do? These women hate my frequency. How can I fix the frequency? And he said, look at the physiology behind the frequency. Oh my gosh, the female reproductive system, they're all menopausal. And I'm walking around going, oh my God, they're menopausal. And my wife's like, what are you talking about? And I said, these poor ladies are menopausal. And so 528 is overstimulating them. So guess what? It's driving them bonkers. So I responded. I did a MailChimp thing to all of them. I said, listen, I think I understand. Try this. I want you to listen to all the frequencies as much as you want, except 528. And I want you to ratchet it down to maybe 2 times a week. Okay. Until you can listen to it, it doesn't make you feel edgy or some of the other words they use that I won't say on this broadcast, but they were just going out of their heads. So about a month later, I get these love notes from these same 50 women going, oh my God, the hot flashes have stopped. Oh my God, I'm sleeping 8 hours through the night. Well, what was happening was they were over-treating. That was the bullseye frequency for them because they were either pre-post or, or at the end of their menopause. And this was just driving their estrogen levels through the kazoo. And so when we were able to get them to back off of that, it did exactly what it was supposed to. It helped balance their hormones to the point where some of this, it was either if they took bioidenticals, it was helping with the bioidenticals, but if they didn't have anything, at least the hot flashes and their sleep was getting better.
So is it okay just to listen to it as background music, or do you need to like lay still and focus?
That's like the number one question. And here's the best part about frequency. You have to realize, just like our voice, you've heard this ad nauseum probably, but when you say something, what we're saying right now, when it passes our ability to hear it, has no relevance upon its eternity. When you say something, you set something into motion that's going to be here forever. This is an important interview because everything we say, and hopefully everything we say is inspired, it's going to be here forever, not just on the stream, but in the air. So it's not important at all that somebody sits there and focuses on this at all. Most of the women that I talked to about it, they were concerned about that. And I said, do what you do every day. Just have it, and you don't even have to have it on loud. I tell people, put it to where it's barely perceptible. Someone, my husband's hard of hearing, so I turn it on 10. It's like, turn it down, because but here's the takeaway, and this is the one that's going to blow your listeners away too. One of my biggest advocates for Wholetones is a deaf girl named Stephanie Rude in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Well, vibrations, frequency, same vibration.
Yes, and that is indicative of what you're saying. It's not only would you feel it on the skin, but it's also having a direct effect on your body on a cellular level. So she never understood why people love music because she's deaf. However, when she got Wholetones, her life started changing and she felt the music, right? Because I tell people all the time, 10% best, the audio is important. So levels of headphones, no headphones, it's irrelevant. As long as you're within proximity where those frequencies can reach you, and believe me, it's a long way. I did an outdoor festival, a Christian festival, and we were playing on stage, and 300, 400, 500 yards away, people were feeling the frequency underlayment. So as long as you're in the house and they're on, you're good.
Well, while we're on the nuts and bolts, I mean, you can do it at night while you're sleeping, actually. Of course, I think you gathered that from what you just said. But yes. There's also an order. I mean, so, you have 7 frequencies, and I think that, you need to explain the different frequencies. They have different purposes. And there's even a story about, these particular frequencies. So kind of get into the nuts and bolts of that. And there is an order from what I read in the book, what you suggest, not that technically. Yeah.
Sure. And the order is really technically only one thing. For your listeners and those that are practitioners, if you're working with frequency, there's a lot of different modalities for introducing frequency into the body, simply not just music, but laser probe, for example, Rife machine. There's a lot of different ways of introducing the body to frequency. So, but one commonality is that all those modalities exist around one center point, which is there has to be an opening frequency. And the opening frequency works energetically the same, even though the ideal might be different. With me, the opening frequency is track number 1, which is called the open door for a reason. Most people resist healing because they don't feel worthy, period. So shame and guilt, which we could get into for hours about Asham and what that meant in the Hebrew and why it was never supposed to be part of a Christian's life ever, because the Lord took care of it on the cross For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, despising a sham. We don't have to go there, but you picking up what I'm throwing down. We're not supposed to be ashamed of anything. We're free. And so with that being said, if you can get somebody to the place where they can come to grips with the fact and say it without feeling any rejection, I am worthy to be healed by God. Yeah. Now, whatever the spot treatments are, let's say, for example, we do have a menopausal lady. I don't say just turn on 528. I say, listen to 396, open up, feel worthy to be healed by God. Now let's spot treat with that. So order-wise, I only say the only order is always open with an opening frequency. And then you're going to know yourself. I can't, by law anymore, believe it or not, I can't prescribe frequencies. I can't even go into the exact characteristics anymore because the government is giving me a hard time because this works. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but I can talk a little bit about it. You brought up a great question. 417 Hertz, which is called Desert Sojourner, would be the second disc in the 7 series set that I'm sure your listeners eventually will become familiar with. When we were using that at first, we didn't really think about all of the capabilities of it, but I was using that to write this book that you read yesterday. So I found that while that frequency was playing, I wrote for hours, sometimes 9 hours at a pop. That book was written in a few days because it was like I couldn't stop writing. And then I realized that it also had a huge, it affected the way that I process information, and it affected the way that I got my work accomplished, meaning procrastination. So when we introduced this two years ago to the working community, I immediately was contacted by Forbes, Inc. magazine, recently Fortune 500. Different people are saying, what in the world is this stuff doing? Because the test groups were people that first was our own PR company, 5W in New York, and they started playing this inside their building in all the little cubicles at low volume. They found out that people weren't peaking out at 3 o'clock, that they were producing more copy and more creatives, that the CEO of the company loved being in the office because he was crushing work. Then we realized there's a component here that actually stimulates creativity. Wow. and helps you get more work done in one day. You think about that on a broad sense, who doesn't need that? So that's one of the, not to mention there's other things I wish I could tell you about, but one of the cool things that have been reported and enough so I feel comfortable to say it on your broadcast is people with tinnitus that listen to that, which is the ringing of the ears that, you can try ginkgo and a lot of other stuff and have a little success, but people that have had it for 10 years plus, even a guy you met, I think Robbie Bessner, a good friend of mine with Therasage, he actually listened to it at my friend's office, and within about 30 minutes, his tinnitus went away and never came back. So that's one of the components about that frequency. And I can tell you, your listeners, real quick, why that would probably work, because it makes sense. If you have an occupational tinnitus, meaning if you work at an airport or you're around loud things, construction worker, musician, basically what happens is there's a resonance in your head. That's what's really happening. And the auditory nerve is involved in that process. And so if you ever saw the movie Major Pain, I don't recommend it, but there was a funny scene where one of his soldiers broke his leg, and he's screaming, my leg. And Major Pain goes to him and he breaks his finger. And he goes, my finger. And he goes, how's your leg? You see, that's how it works. That's how it works. It's like one stimulus. It's like if you've ever seen people in an office where someone's getting an injection and the assistant is tapping them, the tapping technique. It takes your mind off the injection and you're following the stimulus, right? Yep. In the same way, we see this stuff all of the time. So with tinnitus, what we're introducing with 417 is an interrupter frequency that your ear and your auditory nerve grabs a hold of this frequency. And so the other one that you've been working around, and it's occupational, means it happens every day. And so you get what's like a feedback loop. You have this roaring inside of your head and your cranium, and everything's resonating. What we've done is we've created a frequency that takes its place, and it stops that ringing. And that, I can tell you, for some people, I mean, I had it for years because I sat up next to a snare drummer every day that was cracking rim shots and bang, bang. I mean, 200 nights a year. But my tinnitus went away, and I didn't know it was going to. When I recreated these frequencies from working with that frequency, my tinnitus went away.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So do you want to hear about the rest of them? Or?
Well, yeah, no, yeah, I do. Yeah, exactly. And I know then Marilyn has questions too. Yeah, I do want to hear about the rest of them because I know my listeners going, what about the rest of the frequencies?
Okay, so 444 is the next one, and 444 would be what I would call the tuning center. And if we have time, we'll correlate this. Remember, this all correlates when you exhaust the audio realm. You begin to introduce the area of light, which I have an interesting thing I'd like to share later about that. But at any rate, it would be the orange disc, because that's actually the color of the harmonics of the music you're listening to. When you listen to 444, it is the master center tuning. I tune all my instruments to that frequency. So it has an unbelievable ability to bring peace, just like it did probably in Saul's palace. Or I'm telling you, if you're having like a Maalox or migraine moment and you're really going through a hard time, that one just brings everything in the room down. All of the energy, all of the craziness, all the kids are screaming in the other room. You put every person's. I put 444 on and I feel like I can take a breath. And it's subconscious. You're taking a deep breath, but no one said take a deep breath because it has the ability to bring peace in the midst of chaos. 528 we talked about. Huh? Oh, in our house. And then 528 is what we call it's interesting that its Latin name was derived Mira Gestorum, which means the miracle frequency. It is the one that scientists say drastically affects the DNA chain. It is also used in a million different applications. One that's fascinating is a Canadian biologist used it after a huge oil spill in the Gulf to clear 1 cubic mile of stuff that was impacted with sedimentary oil and globs of oil by simply using frequency with massive amplitude. And his research is well known, and oil companies are now looking into using the spray stuff they use to disperse the chemicals and using sound to clear water, which is an interesting thing. 639. For a lot of reasons, whenever I test, I always test for this frequency. And here's a fun one for all of your listeners that have children. It has a behavioral component that I can't really explain, but it's named the bridge for a reason. When you're in a situation where you're having an argument with your spouse, or your kids are going tornado in the other room, or you have a relative in town that's just they're that relative that drives everybody crazy. If you put this music on and don't talk about it or give anybody any lead sheet into it, you turn it on, you find some amazing things. First of all, the kids in the other room are at peace. It gets quiet. And then you see the one kid handing the other kid the toy they were fighting over. And then your fight that was going tornado between you and your wife, suddenly you're simpatico and you can move on. And then that guy that's always an irritant at Christmas just doesn't seem to be so irritating. I love 639 because I see a far greater reaching use for it, even in our inner cities, even in our emergency broadcasting system that for the most part is a pigeon's nest that aren't used as speakers downtown, to be able to introduce a behavioral component of frequency that could curtail violent crime that we're seeing like in Chicago and different places, because it works in the classroom with kids that have disruptive behavioral capabilities.
This might be a completely ridiculous question, but if these tones affect our biology and the way we heal and our state, does it have an outward effect then on our verbal tone when we're frustrated with our kids?
Well, first of all, I learned from a young age, there's no stupid questions. Some of the stupidest questions I thought were stupid are the ones that brought me where I am today. What it will do, here's the fun thing about the way I like to say with frequencies, is that remember your whole life, you don't realize it, but by submersion and by marinating, you've heard the same stuff over and over again. Hey, why do you think that kids, this will blow your mind. Why do you think that kids, that come out a generation, right, later, they sing the same children's songs that we sing. And they have the same major fifth and major third, da, 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 da. Where does that come from? Their parents didn't teach them that, right? It becomes part of us. But part of what's become, us has been a frequency that interrupts our circadian rhythm. And if you look at like I do, I'm always watching, we're becoming a country that's a country of insomniacs.
Yeah, yeah.
We are. if you look, I think it was 23 million people suffer from insomnia in the United States of America. That's a spike. Well, there's a reason why. Will it change your voice? Well, here's the best part. Your voice is your organic real estate or postage stamp of your identity. Meaning, if your husband calls you on the phone and he's on the road and he hears your voice, immediately he's going to know she's in good health. She's not in good health. She's stressed out. She's happy. She's just had a glass of wine. You're going to hear that in our voice. It's normal. So with that being said, it won't necessarily change your tone at that time, but what it will do over time is begin to recalibrate you with a whole new set of tones that you will in turn, remember, there's perfect pitch and relative pitch. Most people have relative pitch. After a period of time, they can pick out that note. You'll begin to resonate with a whole new frequency, and that will in turn help you on a behavioral place and have more peace with your kids.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's encouraging.
Absolutely.
And again, just because, moms do get caught up with, being berated with the same questions or the same responses because of the frustrations of just raising kids, in this case, teenagers. But, if you have that marinating going on and you slowly over time just have a greater sense of peace, I would expect that would exactly happen. There wouldn't be that same
you have the
reaction.
Being a mom's the hardest occupation in the world, period. I mean, all of us guys, a lot of times people look at the guys because we're out there or our names in a newspaper, whatever. Behind every great man is a greater woman. And so believe me, I understand when you're saying that, I understand it because we have friends that have special needs children, autistic children that I get to work with, which I adore them and they love this music. But the point is that being a mom, you're on site. Most of us are either catching a plane to get to another plane or on some sales call or doing something or creating something. And then there's mom. So anyway, thumbs up.
So what about that? Like for brain, I was thinking of an autistic child, obviously 444 for sure. I mean, the open, but what other ones for the brain, for an autistic child, or even a neurodegenerative of dementia?
Now, here's the cool thing. You have to remember that you can have the same malady, but how you got it could be from a different stimulus, right?
Yeah,
one could come from rejection. The other one could come from this, or depression could have been because of the rejection, or there's so many myriads of ways. What I tell people to do, doctor, is, there's classic ways to get at that, and you can think it through by looking at, but what I find, which I was getting to with the next frequency, is that some frequencies affect, a control group of people completely different, totally different. And so it all, the elemental truth is that God created all of us different. And so frequencies affect all of us minutely a different way. One thing that's exciting though is from an atomic weight level, all of our organs are plus minus. And so that's where I'm really comfortable working with people with frequencies because, negligibly, the heart weighs virtually the same within ounces, the lungs, what have you, brain, that can be argued. But you catch my point. That's easy to resonate. Where it gets more tough is in the behavioral area and then, of course, the brain. So when I talked to Dr. Daniel Amen, we had quite a conversation, and I love this man. The funny thing is what he told me when we were talking in Scottsdale is he said, originally I wanted to be a priest. And I said, you did? And he said, yeah, but can you imagine my name, Father Amen? So, but he is, when it comes to topographic brain mapping and understanding the brain, I never met anybody that knows more than Dr. Amen. And we were talking about this a little bit, and, there's chemicals involved, right? And so when you think about brain chemistry even, you could look at what the frequencies do, and you could surmise that if we started with 396 and then we went to and worked on the DNA in 528, and then if there was anything was because of viral, fungal, we go to 741, but we could miss it by a mile. The best thing to do is to let people play through their, starting with 396, start through their 7-note frequency. You're going to find out the very first time you listen to it. If something's irritating you, congratulations, you've just found a problem. It's not because it's not entertainment. So it's like, I don't like that one. Well, the one that you're not liking, you have to look a little deeper. And the book does, I can't say it anymore on air, but the book does explain to some degree what all of those frequencies does.
Yeah, no, it does. And look, I mean, each frequency is 22 minutes approximately.
Yes,
you know, to listen
22.
22. That's why I said approximately. Anyway, so, you know, I mean, obviously, I mean, if you're playing them at night, you're getting through it several times, you know, no doubt about it. You know, in your book, you know, you talked about digital versus, you know, basically the old, well, we call it analog. I mean, the old, but, you know, still relevant today. But, you know, so that was one of the questions I have, because we're receiving it when you purchase it. By the way, folks, look for the link, because gethealthytones.com, and you'll get you know, be able to get what we're talking about. But it comes digital, but you record it analog, and I probably just overstepped something right there, because you have to just explain the two.
No, you nailed it. And believe it or not, let me tell you, this is the most misunderstood subject in the entire book. You wouldn't think it would be, but it by far is. So much so I had to do FAQs, and I still get probably 200 emails a week going, well, why would you create a digital thing? I'll explain. So when we're talking about analog versus digital, some of us on this broadcast are old enough to remember the 12-inch vinyl disc. There, as far as the industry standard of reproducing proper resonant peaks and frequencies, there's nothing that is more specific than a record. And there's plus minus problems with that, isn't there? Storage, first of all, is why everybody changes everything. Inconvenience, they scratch, whatnot. But we have to realize that up until that time, there was no better modality for recording music, because it was true. So as things moved out, and Billy Joel's 52nd Street was the first compact disc, the first CD that was ever recorded. That was the first one that went out. It was still a really good technology, because it was, even though there was the first conversion of binary, there's a nice analog ability for a disc to still be able to hold information. However, we got to the MP3s truncating. Now, you know, I just found out that Apple is going to do away with all their music downloads by 2019. Think about it, which means everything will go to streaming audio. So let me explain for your listeners. So the chapter you speak of is bigger is better. Analog frequency is a real-time, robust, the full measurement of all frequencies. Digital are the numbers that are getting as close as they can in a binary system to that same exact waveform. Now, in the last 50 years, you can't compare what's happened technologically. At first, the digital stuff was a waste. I couldn't use it. But if you're recording music, nobody has 2-inch tape players for the most part anymore, and nobody's listening to records, even though there's a resurgence of it. So you have to come up with a workaround. What I did was I decided to use WAV files versus MP3s for downloads, which obviously is huge. The second thing I did was I recorded everything with analog instruments through analog technology, meaning in the studio. Tube processors, tube preamps, Neve preamps, stuff that warms the signal up versus just hardcore hard drive digital. After that point, when I mastered it, everything went back through tubes again. So what you have is the digital side of my music is simply endless tracks to use, the simplicity of not having to re-record a million times. It's virtual, you know, as far as the recording process, virtual tracking, simple. The music side of my stuff is very, very close to being fully analog. That's why it works. And that's why even our MP3s, some of the biggest testimonies come from people that never even bought my stuff, that listened to a 2-minute sample. There's a nurse in Tampa, Florida, who called me, and she was really stoic and to the point. Hi, my name's so-and-so, and I'm an RN from Tampa General. And I just have to tell you that I had when she said I had rheumatoid arthritis. And I said, well, that's incurable. She goes, that's what we believed. She said, but somebody sent me this sample, a spinning disc on your website. And she said, I listened to 417 one time. And she goes, that was 3 months ago. I have no more rheumatoid arthritis, and I'm a believer. That was a nurse.
Wow.
So,
you know, I want to interrupt you just for a second, because I thought something you talked about was really fascinating to me. And that was about Joseph Goebbels, the minister of propaganda under Hitler.
Yeah.
And I am just a strong proponent of freedom. and how
Yeah.
people get so distracted by the minutia that they miss the bigger picture of what we really need to be aware of. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist at all.
Yeah, I'm not either.
But there are things that are historical fact. And one of those things that you really did a great job of addressing was about what had happened with his intent and his success in switching that whole, that frequency.
Well,
and the end result, chaos and disorder that is still affecting us today.
Well, like I told you at the beginning of the broadcast, the discovery came from a question that no one could answer. I had a sense that there was something wrong with music, okay? The Germans obviously knew there was something wrong with 440 hertz, or they would not have called it the German radio beat. It became what they broadcast on for their propagandist message to people, telling them that the war was, we're winning the war, and all of their propagandist films and audio. At the same time, Joseph Goebbels was responsible for basically propaganda and mind control experiments done against the Jews. But one of the things that he did was they worked with creating insomniacs. There was Jews that didn't sleep for 6 months at a time, and they were trying to find out what would happen to them if they never let them sleep. And 440 was one of the interrupting frequencies they used to keep them from sleep. But on a far wider range of what the heck was when in wartime, when this guy is like basically the right-hand man to Adolf Hitler, why is he traveling around the globe trying to talk all these other countries into changing their tuning center to 440? You have to understand the Nazis had a complete idea of taking over everything. They didn't like our culture, so they burned all of the music, destroyed the statue. They wanted to be the master race that recreated everything, including being able to control people by the militarization of music. So what happens is, in a long story short, all the other countries, tell them to go fly a kite, except the United States and Canada. And the US and Canada adopt the 440 hertz tuning center that was called standard pitch for many years, until constantly, like different school groups, would challenge that terminology. And thank God it was overthrown. But it is not, there is no standard tuning. I want to make that very clear. There is no standard tuning anywhere. If today the three of us got on a plane and we went to Venezuela, and I tuned with a tuner from the United States and they tuned with their tuner over there, we couldn't play in tune. We couldn't play in tune. Isn't that amazing? Because they tune to a different frequency than America does. So my point is, there is no standard tuning. But we and the Canadians were the only ones that basically bought into Goebbels' stuff that we needed to now. But the good news is, if you've heard of the Boston Pop Symphony,
yes,
they are the first ones in the United States that are now using 444. So I highly recommend going to see them play live.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great to know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I wanted to ask if I could share one thing.
Absolutely.
Only because I think that your readers it would help them understand, was I wanted to talk about the light and sound component. It's funny, when we're kids, that the first thing that we adhere to in school is show and tell, right? There's like what it is and here it is, right? And so we look at, I mentioned the scripture earlier in John 1, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And he was with God in the beginning, and through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made, and in him was life, and that life, or Zoe, was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. Now, we go back to the very first beginning of Genesis. Notice the same word, beginning. What do we have? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the face of the earth. And the Spirit of the Lord was hovering over the waters. And God said, word, said, spoke. God said, let there be light. Okay. Now, first fun thing is, when did he create the sun, the moon, and the stars?
After.
3 days after. So this light is what? It's the response to what? To the word. It's the response to what God speaks every time. He exhausts the audio realm completely, and then light appears. He can't help himself. He's his own work light. He says something, light appears, because there's no more room. Every frequency between sound and light is excited at his voice. So then we think about what the word says, and it says this. And his voice was like the sound of many waters. And I was spending time with a physicist, and I said, is there anything, in our country, in our world, that exhausts the sonic spectrum? He said, one thing, Niagara Falls. Are you with me? Niagara Falls, the voice of many waters. But what is it really saying? The fullness of frequency. When he says one thing, everything. When he says something to Dr. Pompa, everything else in the room, everything under your feet hears and responds at the same time. It's mind-boggling to think that, people say, well, if we don't cry out, then the rocks will cry out. Rocks are crying out there's quartz in here in my watch. Rocks are crying out right now. It's keeping my wristwatch in perfect time right now. We're not thinking big enough to understand the fact that from the beginning, it all started, all frequency, with the word of the Father. When he spoke it out, all the frequencies were released.
Yeah.
And that's how all of this really works. So the light component, when I created the product Chroma, I did it for a reason. And I was surprised that immediately I got a call from a guy named Jordan Rubin, who at that time was just getting out of his own company, which was Garden of Light.
We know Jordan. Jordan's a friend of ours. Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Matter of fact, by the way, we were actually in when he was growing mushrooms.
Yes.
And he said, hey, listen, I'm playing these tones, these frequencies that are just, absolutely, this is what I'm most excited about, this and that. That's actually when we first heard your music. Yes.
Well, then we don't have to go there because you just told the story, but he started sending me pictures of his Ganoderma and wolfsbane mushrooms that he was growing in his Mycobacterium lab by using the light from Chroma and the sound. And I could not believe, he said, even the bioavailability has been enhanced by using this over the plant. So it's exciting to realize that same voice, that God would give us a postage stamp of his voice to be able to release in our generation, and that it even affects plants and it affects animals.
Well, we know the studies that were done, when they spoke certain words carry a certain frequency.
Yes.
Even the intent of the word, and they changed the water literally under the microscope. I mean, this is you could Google this, folks. When we spoke certain words to certain plants would die. Like if we spoke love to plants, they would actually grow faster. When we spoke death and hate, the plants would literally die. That's real, man.
And you can see in the book, you can see the pictures that Masaru Emoto got from frozen water molecules as he listened to the 7 frequencies. They're actually in my book. There's pictures.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I saw that, and I've known that before this. Well, Michael, I don't know if Mary has any other questions. I just want to thank you so much for being here, and we could talk all day about this. Listen, get the book, but that when you get the music, get healthytones.com. Go there, get this. I'm telling you, it's going to transform your life. I mean, when we talk about fixing the cell to get well, how do we not discuss frequency? I mean, obviously, those frequencies David played years ago, had that effect on Saul, and it can have that effect on us, in many different levels. So, Marilee, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, I actually don't have any questions. I just think you're such an encouragement to people having that certain thing inside them. And I just think maybe you could speak best to people encouraging, or that you could encourage other people to really identify with that deeper question they might have within their soul that they never pursue answer to. And it seemed like you just really took that up with God all the time. And you just really had a deep desire to know some answers about some things that were important to you that you didn't ignore. And look what God birthed through that curiosity and through that desire and expectation of what only he could do, right? Only he could do it the way he did.
No question. I think that Dr. Pompa just said it a minute ago, but that has been the 3-legged approach that has changed my life, which is intention. Like, why am I doing this, right? Then is execution. Once you intend it, then you do it. Because there's, the road to hell is paved with good intention. You got to do it. But then the last is transformation. And so you have what? You have intention, you have execution, and then the result is transformation. I had no idea that 3 years after releasing this, that we'd be close to 100,000 testimonials and be in 164 nations. If somebody would have told me that, I wouldn't have believed them, but only God. If God has something that's his and he wants it noised abroad, he only has to breathe once and it takes off.
Yeah.
I'm so
Thank
honored
you
to be with
so
you
much.
guys.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And this is going to be a show many people are going to share, that's for sure, and turn people onto, as well as your music. So gethealthytones.com, and I hope all you do. So thank you, Michael. Appreciate it.
God bless you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.